benza sandu samaya manu sandu deno mba deja dedro memba wa sodo koyo memba wa sobo koyo memba Anorado memba wa sawa siddhi menda yaza sarva Shiriyam Guru Hong Ha Ha Hom Bhagavan Sarva Dada Munza Binzrim Bhava Ma Samaya Sandu Omo Imben Zarambu Me
Tendru Lama Namla Ne Ome Chichi Hinji Purani Tisu Sanje Kinje Ngo Nye Rade Chorum Ngo Tendere Zave Lame Shabla Ne Tiringende Erisi ane tsujune kanamba shison de kaju shinangore sus kapebri di ngore shuje la ya nga an tsokwa chimbu dinde jila ya an nga debu 퇴상 공성기 연대 간염에 베지기 아니 마 칼로제 dinde 슈크에 땡아라 시라게 심접다 진짜 두디 있나야 안내주 찍려야 안고나베 고나베 나야 진짜시 규칙시고래 순에디 직전에 그거 좀지 심부지 세메로 삼 안두신행에 다들 자리
On the occasion of this first ADC, the First Annual Drukpa Council, Rinpoche has rather unexpectedly been requested to deliver a teaching, to deliver a Dharma talk tonight. Rinpoche says, even though he himself says he does not consider himself to have any particular qualities in the regard of either study or reflection or meditation, yet, since he has been requested, he will do his best to deliver such a talk to the very best of his ability. And hopefully all of you who have come here to attend his talk will be able to benefit of this somehow.
대신 단대 정부인 루진을 지쳐내야 도시 단다 초과래 까나버래 진짜 인상 학과도야 드린기 님들이 아니 쌤 갖고 해지라 아니 겹지 로레 맨주기 템베다고 드리 세팅하서 두 중에 임버데 안 진짜 인도 가라 섬레도 직체비나 안 드리 덴데 상부지면나 삼안 드리지 intention
Particularly, Rinpoche says he's very happy to be able to attend also on this very auspicious day today, on which in the morning the long-awaited and long-missed reincarnation of the great Jawa Loreba has been enthroned in such an auspicious way. So to be in the presence of such a great master and of course of all the other ones assembled here, this is indeed a very joyful and a very precious occasion.
세상아도 가규베 난지네 안반된 주발라야 미세기 계주 된주 면주 판주 세진네 아니 가숨요임브레
Particularly within the various Kanji traditions to which we of course also belong, there are a great many different teachings, a great many different instructions. However, if one were to summarize them, one would come down to three main features or three main points.
아다보지나 라마야 말에 주고야 말에 아니 된주기 단 밀롱압jal하 잠지rin라야 안 된주기 취주 진대경기 미규지레스
So Rinpoche says of himself very clearly that he does not consider himself a lama. He is also not considered a tulku, nor does he consider himself like this, but he is standing in a particular lineage which has persisted since about 500 years, which is a family lineage. And this family lineage, Rinpoche himself is the present holder of.
An tanda jingbu ge seta nangpa shinjin tungse se di loju dabu nyingdun dabu shuna ta autinte dabu res.
And to very briefly summarize the story of this particular lineage, of this family transmission which Rinpoche is holding, the story, so to speak, goes like this.
Tati nge ngondre zami.
Rinpoche will now proceed to relate a little bit of this to us, to point the features of this lineage out.
Tati ring anzo tuzu shira meba yindu ani nge keja mangbo mashubini ta kaa nyungyunji ki tohne ani anzo che tante jo matsu kone ani kaa tuduji ki tohne ani nezu kache shuduwa chegi yinsi.
However, of course, we do not have very much time at our disposal, so therefore Rinpoche has to be very brief. However, he will try his best to get the main points, the main features of this particular lineage history across in the short time that is given us.
And
Rinpoche also did not have much time to prepare, so this is very much an unprepared talk, so to speak. It's now been about 2,500 years that in this world appeared the Buddha, who is known under various names. One of them was Shakyasenge.
Sangye shagya tube an ngaranzo tembata semjeng la kongi an shoyu pongbu yedishirung sungba yimres.
This name meaning nothing other but the lion of the Shakyas. None other is meant here, but the Buddha Shakyamuni, Shakyatupa, as he's also known in Tibetan, who is the very originator of all of these teachings and practices that we are familiar with.
Ani sangye Jeni, ani chögi kulorimba sumukoni tara ani be loru kawanzening ani tara ngomba zoga dojitena ngomba zoga sangyewa imres.
After he underwent various different austerities, etc., it is commonly known that the Buddha then eventually went to the Vajra seat at Bodh Gaya, where he demonstrated the achievement of enlightenment, of Buddhahood.
Sanje chumden de kunyangenen dene lota nijamha sumjak parachi jela ani be ngombo lutu yebsela soga pe imbares.
Then about 300 to 400 years after the passing of the Buddha, the great master Arya Nagarjuna appeared in this world.
An lutu yesege sanje ke komba nam ani be ma tela naje. The
great Arya Nagarjuna and also his spiritual sons, his spiritual followers are known to have caused the great monastic university of Nalanda to be erected.
Ani nalendege an changu songwe pendita ani jaga tubji penje naroba pebe imbres.
Also, as is common knowledge, after the construction of Nalanda, Nalanda University produced a great many accomplished scholars, great masters in their own right, and one of them was the great Mahapandita Naropa.
Dineji ane Naropa le ta kandroge lungde mangboche ni tar ane pe tilubege shabla tuni. Ane tanda ngato kajubege chugin jungun rabo ta duksungu yores.
the great master Naropa, then after having studied for many years, after having become an expert in all fields, he then eventually also went to study under his main guru, his main teacher, Tilopa, and he taught many other students in the course of his time. And in this way, he became one of the masters who originated the various Kagyu lineages that came to being in this world.
Tinde ta tine ngado pyoge loza wa an pama ba loza jagala peni ta khanda yongja ani ji marba mila kambo pato ngado ta tuksini kaji shi jabe tanye di juni an tus pyola ya tempa tarares.
Then eventually the famous Tibetan translator Mapa went to India to study under a great many masters, predominantly under Naropa. He then exported or imported, however you want to look at it, these teachings to Tibet, translated them. His main student then became the master of yogis, Milarepa, of whom one of his main students was the great master Gampopa. So in this way, these masters became the originators of the various Kagyupa traditions.
Tatine ma cheche ani thagwe ma juni ani rimbar cheni ta thar ani rungwe tsangpa jarege padu oduksini kajushi shechawege ani tanye di che ani rungwe tsangpa jarege che la ta ngen chese shu mogo bacheni khazakani kyangwe chone ba shipshi chawan rabu tinte se tsangpa jarege loju ya tu se kanna yore tinte se ngege de ta
Then one of the great masters that followed after these initiators of the Kagyu traditions is the protector of beings Tsangpa, of whom we have already heard on one of the previous days by the very venerable Jamgon Chogyun Rinpoche. So Rinpoche feels there is no need to go into any further detail regarding these matters. They are common knowledge.
Ta tsangpa jeregi loma ani jawa ko tsangpa dan loreba seje an logo ni seje du junior jawa ko tsangpa ne ani be ma to tundu namji kama loreba ne mendo sai chewa seje ani nga to drupa la ya ta drupa deme parsum se du sini chungres.
The lineage then, or one of the lineage which was destined to become one of the Drukpa lineages, in this particular point then continues from Tsangpa Jare through Jawa Götsangpa and Jawa Lorepa.
Tindi ta nge kapsu papa ani deyo cheni ta tanda tundu namji karma ki tembe tabo Jawa Götsangpa rede ani be Götsangpa ne ma la ju ni ki che la ani barawa genze pesan shugi ani trudu chichong res.
So from among the various Drukpa lineages that evolved, it was the upper Drukpa, or Terdruk as they're known in Tibetan, which was established by Jawa Götsangpa, who then transmitted it through his various students. One of them then became known as the master with the name Barawa Chense Pesang.
Tange Barawa Chense Pesang ki namtan rabo didi shuins.
And Rinpoche wants to proceed to relate a few of the details of the story of this particular master, this Barawa Chense Pesang.
Ani tendrugi tolaya Götsangpa ta an yangun bege ani be tenju shira nyungnyung res.
Now, of the teachings of these masters, like Jawa Götsangpa, also Jawa Yangönpa, there have been such collections as collected works of theirs, but nowadays not much of these teachings is available anymore. We only have very little of these of the teachings of these masters left.
Chetan Barawa Chense Pesang ke ani kampum pechungi cheche tuse zayores.
However, of the collected works of Barawa Chense Pesang, 12 volumes of his collected works are still extant today.
제가 추주 디기 아니 베지기 공부 차상다 차베다 대소 대리선이 시작이 용용차 되어res.
Within the upper Drukpa tradition, the Drukpa tradition, the teachings which are still extant of Barawa Chense Pesang are not really studied very widely, are not very disseminated very widely.
제가 미망벽이 아니 무신기 말했어.
In this way, neither these teachings of this master nor the master himself are very well known nowadays.
단대 내급수야다 추주디 아니 진이 나다와 민용세지기 라요를 마다시 단대 같이 못 배투고요 말했어.
These teachings are rather more transmitted through a small number of people, a small lineage, and Rinpoche says of himself that apart from himself, there are only a very few others who know of these teachings in the first place and who could be considered as holders of these teachings.
세상 아주 루베 템페 다 보더보데 장완 루바 코나 인디스네 코레기다 라르소시 나에게 하는 공부 자체부 시기도스.
However, it is the express wish of His Holiness the Jalmung Drukpa, who of course is in the know of these teachings, knows everything about them, that these teachings should be continued, that they should not be allowed to be lost, but they should be continued by all means.
제산 바레웨 깜봄 베중이 나로려야 아니 대 하장기 안 섭신 계획이 땡주 망부 잡나요 그래서.
The majority of these teachings, of Barawa Chense Pesang are treatises, commentaries on various subjects, and indeed among these 12 volumes of collected works of his, they make up the majority of the material, these treatises and commentaries.
세상에 드림 바레웨게 모두 때 슈베이나네 민망부지기 다 된주신이 딘데지레 샤 공해지 캠바 용거레 삼sek에디 제니슈위스.
So since they are an integral part, however unknown, within the upper Drukpa and the Drukpa tradition, this might be a good opportunity to raise some awareness about the existence of these teachings and the existence of the masters of that particular lineage.
바라와 겐젠 배상기 로준도 통잠 슈베이나 그 안에 그 유치 철호가 세세기 윤론나라야 구충바인 말에.
The place in which Barawa Chense Pesang was born is situated in the center of Tibet, in the central province known as U in Tibetan, and or if one were to look at this large central Tibetan province, then there would be a smaller region by name of Loka. In this particular location in Loka, which is part of central Tibet, he was born.
세상 공 춘중간에 공로 숨시간에 아니 배기운 담배기 상당 견제바 땡제 다 저기 부로발이야 최남백에 즉 추저보다 더다 사딘데 지게 아니 바지 티간의 슈니 아니 최체백에 제바다 틴데 망고 땡인 버레스.
It is mentioned in various histories, or his birth, the very existence of this master is mentioned in various histories, and in all of them, to a greater or lesser extent, there is some talk about the various auspicious circumstances that occurred during his birth, signifying that he was not an ordinary being.
아니 공개 юм되게 아니 라마 잡아지기 깨워 임바다 세제 아니 사자라야 안 잡아주고 임버레스.
So initially, the Master Barawa Chense Pesang, after having grown up and after having learned some initial Dharma teachings, he then took upon himself the resolve to become an ordained person, to become an ordained Buddhist monk, and he took ordination first from masters of the Sakyapa tradition. And he then eventually also initiated his studies within the Sakya tradition until at a certain time he had fully mastered all the doctrines of the Sakya tradition. He became very learned in the teachings of the Sakyapa. So after having mastered all the teachings, all the various doctrines of the Sakyapa tradition, Barawa Chense Pesang then went into the presence of various Kajupa masters to study their teachings, to familiarize himself with their practices, etc. It is said that Barawa Chense Pesang, was an incarnation or an emanation rather of the Indian Mahasiddha Saraha. His main root teacher, one could say, became then the master who was known under the name Tukse Chenga Rindin. From him he studied, under him he studied all sorts of teachings and instructions. He received all sorts of transmissions from him, and he became a very able, a very gifted student of this master. Tukse Chenga Rindin and Jawa Yangunbe Lomares. This master, this Tukse Chenga Rindin, was a student of the great Jawa Yangunpa, who is one of the early Drukpa lineage masters. And from this master, then Barawa received all sorts of oral transmissions, empowerments, practical instructions, and so forth, and it is said that he mastered them fully. From among these various teachings which the Master Barawa has composed, which were then compiled in this collection of 12 volumes, there is a particular set of teachings based on the instructions that he has received from his main master, which comes in 3 parts. These 3 parts can be summarized basically under 3 headings. One could say that the first part consists of teachings on actual training, on actual practice, how to familiarize oneself with the various types of practices or trainings. The second part consists of scriptural study, and the third part consists of all the various activities for the benefit of others. In this way, this means that he learned how to deliver teachings, how to give empowerments, etc., and so forth, for the benefit of others. All of these various activities which entail the welfare of others or bring the welfare of others about. So these make up basically the the main part of the teachings. These are the most essential, most important teachings of this master Barawa Chense Pesang.
공기 땡지 되지 나로래야 아니 지기 코란기 믹스에게 두 냠수 셰베게 냠용 만다와 진짜 망부슈요 이메레.
Particularly in his teachings, he always emphasized the importance of practice. If one were to look at his collected works, at all the teachings that he left us, which are still available nowadays, one would easily, clearly see that the emphasis of practice, the importance of practice, was very close to Barawa's heart.
제사 아니가도 그 유배 차진 추주 냠시 있는 게 개보 망부지기 아니 공기 숭라야 하장기 아니 배 세마르지 이제 그저래 냠레 나레 낭니래야 지 대수 시작이 아니 가져왔다 로바 슈거를 했다 수레비알 펜도 친구 연구도 숨겨야랬어.
Particularly in regard to the practices and teachings as they're transmitted among the various Kaji lineages, accordingly, the majority of instructions that we find in the collected works of this Master Barawa are teachings on the very special Mahamudra transmissions as they are transmitted through the Kaji lineages. Various teachings, explanations on how to put Mahamudra practice into training, how to actualize these instructions are left us by this master.
하바르도야 아니 배 라마 트베게 라두 게 땅마 아니 공개바 제제 아니 텔레바 난두스.
No, so particularly where Mahamudra instructions are concerned, of course it is of utmost importance that one trains oneself in the meditation of Guru Yoga. Of course, then accordingly we find very distinct, very clear and detailed instructions on Guru Yoga practice in the works of this master.
제니 아니 공기 라주 지나 상숨세제 하장기 사비에 템부딘데 제니 때려 바왔나니 아니 디기 다 공기 주고 당부디기 로마
Barawa Chense Pesang then also composed a Guru Yoga practice focusing upon himself. However, he did not transmit this practice, he did not teach it widely or disseminate it widely. However, he concealed it as a Dharma treasure, as a terma, so to speak. And then, after having done so, and after having eventually passed away, then the incarnation, the rebirth of Barawa appeared, and he was known under the name. He was known under the name Nangpa Jalsen.
근데 인도 아니 녜기다 메보 고마 달로 나피아즈 킹게리 제니 콩 아니 바랄이야 아니 넨젤 페레스 넨젤 페니 안 바라베 주고 나바 겐즈기 샤바투니 바르주센 셈바레.
This rebirth of Barawa, of the Master Barawa, by name of Nangpa Jalsen, then eventually became an ancestor of Rinpoche himself, and the lineage of his teachings, of his instructions, etc., has subsequently then been passed down.
제니 아니 얘기 메보 고마 로트 슈비 슈긴지 아니 바랄이야 자니 주고 나바 겐즈 군도네 까지 슈니 슈디자네 아니 바레기 내다 아니 숨마게 아니 배 규규제니 콩라야 아니 라주 지나상수 텔레베 요베데 룽디 종아레스.
When, however, the incarnation Nangpa Jalsen had appeared, It came to pass then at a certain time that the local protector of the site where Bhairawa himself had lived, where he had established himself, the local protective deity then came into his presence and alerted him to the effect that this teaching, this particular Guru Yoga practice had been hidden, had been concealed at a certain place by Nangpa Gyaltsen's previous incarnation.
제장 라줍디도 아니 당먼저 냠시 추신도 제투베이나 하장게 아니 진럽침보다 사비에 침부게 딘데 담바레도.
This Guru Yoga practice, which was then eventually found and which was then eventually decoded, is said to be a very efficient practice, a very efficient Guru Yoga practice, and to transmit great blessings and inspiration.
다 디네 제제 안투 다데 바도다 안간조 규바 다 유산 초라야 다데베디 바라와 진진 베산네 제제 아니 녜기 진진자벨라만 바도 간조 규바도 세니 삼마제바 네데요레스.
And this particular practice and also these teachings have then subsequently been passed down to the present day through the lineage, the family tradition, the family lineage of Rinpoche himself, of which he is the present holder. These teachings, these instructions are known to be full of blessing and full of inspiration, and they have indeed been preserved.
제산 바라베기 아니 배 당마 망보 예배 나네 아니 표도 중화되다 라줍디 책이 요래서 바라 라줍sen 민쿠라 수도 다 요래서.
It is said that from among all the various teachings and instructions which the original Bhairawa master has left, which are passed down to us subsequently, as has been mentioned before, there are a great many of them. However, the most profound, the most efficient of these practices is that particular tradition of this threefold Guru Yoga practice.
지당한저 깨규발라야 아니지 냠시조 라주라 레디 이난 바라웨디 믹세기 아니다 때마스나 초라고 제제 간다 실업진지 당한저 면이 딘데지기 유스.
Generally speaking, among the various Kagyu lineages of which we of course are also a part, there are a great many such teachings which, it goes without saying, they are all but very efficient and full of blessing and inspiration. This particular lineage that has been handed down to us to the present day of the Bhairawa masters is a rather special one among these great many different lineages and instructions that we have nowadays. In that regard, that it is a rediscovered teaching, a Dharma teaching, so to speak.
제가 말한 의미다 들으냠내시라게제 두부요 말에 신기요 말에 이나 야지 수수 레다 까와다 면랑베 렌데체니 안티데야 지기 지난저 지게기 미소다 텐산시라게 디 가수를 나주 돌로토나 전부 남기 요래 딘데 인도 딘데 기념시 낭바이나 드리산이다 베자야라게 요래스.
As Rinpoche himself has pointed out initially, he himself does not think of himself in any particular way as a great practitioner. However, having pointed out these facts to you now, it might just be possible that the one or other person who is present here might develop an interest in these particular teachings. If that should eventually be so, let it be known that the corresponding texts which are necessary to take up this particular practice, to familiarize oneself with this particular practice, can be made available.
다 바라웨게 뜬주 바라웨게 추규 기로주 딘데 잠면로스.
And this may serve only as a very brief introduction to this particular lineage which was founded by this master who was known under the name of Bhairawa.
여기 슈실라 마실라제 망부슈니 펜도양 유주 말이스.
to say more at this particular point. Rinpoche thinks would not be of any particular benefit, therefore we'd rather leave it at that for the time being.
당하라도 참말로 지 민도버 동해에 더 대화래디 아니 대외기 주르미시 아니 지게 민도버 빵미시 다 딘제시는 가라서 코알라 코르데기 여러바스.
Now, generally speaking, it is the case that all of us, to some extent or another, hope to experience happiness, while at the same time we hope to avoid suffering. That has been the very driving force of us since beginningless time, and it is exactly that which, until the present moment, has kept us cycling in the cycle of samsara.
당하라도 코알라 내 아니 탑에 탑라 아니 배 개와투 미개와 빵 지기어레스.
Now, what is the predominant method of bringing the cycle of suffering of samsara to an end? Of course, it is to avoid, to abandon negativity, non-virtue to the very best of our ability, and to adopt virtue, to adopt positive acts to the best of our ability.
다 코알라 탑에 탑 말한서 개와투 아니 배디야 아니 배다 개와투를 주로 나가 망부여래 있나야 저도 당한서 배 라마 땡고 여러바스.
Now, there are a great many different methods of accumulating merit. We have heard of many different methods, but one of the most efficient means of doing so, of accumulating merit, is to supplicate the teacher, the Lama, to serve the Lama.
제산 라마 땡기도 땅에지 라마 마템발라 땅아저지 최지 주다 매베임래.
To do so is to serve or to venerate the very source of Dharma. And with this would be, if in this way we would venerate, we would serve our teachers or lamas to the very best of our ability, that would indeed be a very beneficial, a very meritorious, virtuous act.
라마 땡고래 이 라마디야 아니 친이 참고 땡고에 개침물이.
Because, of course, it goes without saying that we need to develop good qualities or characteristics, and we also need to look at the qualities and characteristics of the lamas, of the teachers that we meet. The better the qualities or the characteristics of these teachers are, the better it is, of course, for all concerned.
라마게 친이 돼 라마 친이 신된 세제 순구요레스.
When examining a teacher as to his qualities or characteristics, it is said traditionally that there are 4 characteristics that one could find in a proper teacher.
친이 시디 가르레슈나 라마랑데 안 똑바 탈침바. 신도라 아니 투지된 데바. 이게 된도 아니 캐시 좀 세제 다 라마 친이 참바 칸데지 고였으나 다 디시부 참바지기 라마지 고요레스.
The qualities or the characteristics that such a teacher should have are that he has brought about benefit for himself through the study and the practice of Dharma to such a way that he has achieved a certain state. He should then be compassionate and considerate of others. He should be learned in such a way that he is able to impart Dharma teachings, to pass them on to us. And he should be able to diligently do so.
제가 대리사님 zam불이 충주차니 아니 간도 배 샤조 누조 가와이네 다 등사 낭저 아니 다르신 걸 왔어.
In this regard, one can say that nowadays the world has become rather small, in this way that it is possible to go wherever one likes, wherever one wishes to reach, one can easily get there. And if one were to look closely, we could indeed see that the teaching of the Dharma has spread almost all over the entire world.
Yenaya nyumanga tugi ane lama kyonda yonden jema mato ngonju jawa koman nashi ta konju jebu thaba resung mato an tingsa ngato lama yuze ta chini changpa ta nigdugi ta yongyo mares.
However that might be, there is a great many teachers out there who do not necessarily fulfill all the requisites of being called a proper, a worthy teacher. Whether such a teacher, such a lama, would appear in the shape of an ordained person or of a lay person, we live in degenerate times, and therefore the appearance of teachers which have all the required characteristics or qualities is indeed difficult.
세상에 디 아니 지난주 지게는 배워줘야 믹세제니 아니 라마 때만 두잖아요. 서서나로나스.
Particularly those teachers who are sent to the West, who travel to the West to act in their capacity as Dharma teachers there, ought to be very careful.
먼저 별이다 히말라야 리줄라 당에 가면 죽음에서.
Particularly those who do not wish to stay in these parts of the world, in the Himalayan regions from which they come, who rather wish to go to Western or any other country abroad for that matter to try themselves out as Dharma teachers, they ought to be very, very careful.
제가 등산 지난주 가수들 지게 유튜브라야 아니 나주라 시작이 대바침보다 아니 벨라마 망고 페이지 뒷는 게 여자 마다 지게가 로마뉴스라 로마뉴디 아니 달라만 때나 거 되게 개침부지 통제 아니 지난주 때서 펜나 삼딩인데 nende진 슈유스.
Particularly those who travel to the West to serve as teachers there must be careful in regard of not overestimating themselves in regard to the benefit which they're able to bring.
다 단다 공도 라마 체니 시단 덴바지 땡고레 지슈버와 데디싱 아란조 로마야 안 체니 시단 덴바지 고고요레스 담배추에 뷰 타고지 냠술 렘버제발라.
Now, however the characteristics of a teacher have to be, if these come together in the best possible way, that one should find a teacher who has all the characteristics, who has brought of them together to be a worthy teacher, then it should also clearly be known that we as students who come into the presence of such teachers to learn from them, we also need to bring some qualities, some certain characteristics with ourselves.
세상 알아 저 로마디아 아니 생이시 간데레스나 아 라말레야 메바체와 구바체와 주바체느바 담지 숭느바 왔다 디시딩 알아도 로마를 참고요레스.
The qualities that we as students should or the characteristics that we students should have when we go into the presence of a teacher is that on the one hand we should have an interest, a genuine interest in the teaching. We should be able to take the learning of such teaching, the familiarizing of such teaching upon ourselves. We should have the necessary respect and regard for the teacher, and we should be able to internalize that which the teacher teaches us, which the teacher imparts to us.
달로마 라야 신이 시단 덴바 덴데지기 신이 창니 아니 라메 군드네 최슈베이나 아니 뭐네 타네 알라메기 진럽데 랑이기 줄이야 주구여 세수고도.
It is said that if the teacher brings with him or herself, for that matter, the necessary characteristics, and he meets or she meets students which are endowed with the necessary characteristics, then indeed the teaching of the Dharma from teacher to student will be successful, and the students can indeed experience the blessing and inspiration which is imparted through the transmission of such Dharma teachings.
다티네 진럽 셀라메 진럽 주 생각하는 사람 시기 요래디 안 진럽이 천천대로 가리 인생의 signi shuna samso.
We will indeed in this way then receive the blessing and the inspiration of the teacher. However, it is necessary also that we bring a certain diligence into the equation.
진럽 세계 치디 다 강사 신지기 아니 똑바함 투다 네벌레 때네 아니 간도 강사 신지기 로디 교르투버지기 다 디트윈 서레스.
If in this way we are enabled to truly receive blessing and inspiration, this will in turn have the effect that we are truly able to transform this mind of ours, to transform this intellect of ours, to make it malleable, so to speak, and to basically make the best of whatever teachings and instruction that is that we receive in such a way.
제산 진럽 신이되기 된 도르드나 아니 로주레 임바레스.
If one were to, we often hear these terms of blessing and inspiration. If one were to wonder what that actually means, and if one were to summarize the meaning of blessing or inspiration that we receive through our teachers, one would have to say that it is that which transforms our thinking, our conceptual outlook. It's that which transforms our mind stream, so to speak.
Tinde yundu lama tang loma nija tsini denbaji기 토네 땅아주 안추 칸다 칸 슈베이나 아니 문에 타네 뉴버텀바다 안 지러지고 용투부 예설에서.
If a teacher with the proper characteristics and a student endowed with the proper characteristics come together, then indeed the full potential of the Dharma can indeed come to fruition.
세상 하란주 아니 라마레야 무기 제에디 가수에 라마 무슨 상계 더버질라 통투부이나 아니 상계기 아니 지랍 주구이.
It is said that if a student is able to truly view his or her teacher as no different from the Buddha, then indeed that student will receive the blessing and inspiration of the Buddha from his or her teacher.
라마 상계 뭐 더버질이야 아주 매바 깨마툼니 다 장주 셈바 잠 더버질이야 안 더버질이야 매바 깨비나 안 대잠지 장주 셈바 잠지 질럽마도 아니 배 상계기 질럽 뭐 더버질 주투 매비면서.
If one is able to see one's teacher as a bodhisattva and regard him as such, then similarly one will be able to receive the blessing and inspiration of a bodhisattva through the blessing of one's teacher.
라마랑라는 상계다 장주 셈바 깨마투니 매바 깨마투니 다 깨보 미냠 다 깨보신다 미냠 야가더지 대더지 통투구이나 대점지기 대럽박에 질럽지마도 뭐 상식이 질럽 다 주투 매버레스 깨보 상보점기 질럽 마도 아니 질럽디 대마도 주투 말레스.
If, on the other hand, one is not able to regard one's teacher as a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, if one were rather consider the teacher as an ordinary being, well, then of course it goes without saying that then one will also not be able to receive the blessing of a Buddha or of a Bodhisattva. One would rather receive the blessing, if there is such a thing, to in the first place, of an ordinary being. So what actually makes the difference here, whether or not one receives the blessing and inspiration of one's teacher, is the outlook that oneself as a student has, is the way in which one regards one's teacher.
대탐제 노르드이나 아는 저기 가져야지 검투구이나 델럽바와지기 질럽지마도 아니 질럽자지 자탐다 주투에게디 고매이 말이지.
To make it very short, or to summarize, however much we are able to practice, to familiarize ourselves with the various practices, to train ourselves, however much we're able to do that, to that very same extent we will be able to receive the corresponding blessing and inspiration, or experience the blessing and inspiration in this way.
제가 말아도 삼아 라주 게드 강론지 다 만든 게 폐지요 말에 된데 인도산에 라말레야 무기디 가가지 집에 로드 채웠다 아니 배 삼로 갸채웠다니 아니 무기기 틈나 다가지 징하란도 진럽 주고요 이말에.
Generally speaking, in particular, when we practice the meditation of Guru Yoga, which is one of the most efficient practices there are, whether we practice the more extensive Guru Yoga practices or we train ourselves in very concise Guru Yoga practices, according to however much interest and however much devotion we ourselves as students bring into that equation, accordingly we will partake of the blessing and inspiration that is being derived through such practice.
대탐제 노르드니 슈베이나 먼저 승준이야 로마 이시 계위치 주도 그 로규시스 로규 된게 마시나 이마체의 견도 줄 제제다 먼저 승준을 딘데 요레스.
It is said accordingly that in order to bring about the necessary interest, the necessary consideration and devotion for one's teacher, that one should familiarize oneself with the stories of the teachers of the past. If one does so thoroughly, then indeed devotion towards the teacher, confidence in the teacher, etc. and so forth will be born within ourselves. So in this way, concerning ourselves with the study of the stories of the masters of the past is indeed a very beneficial thing.
다탄데 kondu shube dige 마라웨기 다 취주 다 냠랭게 조 제가도지 이사레스.
And as we have heard, as we were talking about this particular type of practice, also from among the teachings of the great Bharava master and the lineage that sprung from him, this particular teaching, this particular sort of practice, which was what he emphasized.
말한도 상말로 냠랭 게도 가이나지 제대기 요레스. 재산대소 안에 냠랭 칸다 칸체로 인해 지금 인구 바직도 되니 안나고에데 계시무도 대야 아니 담바숨지 찌심바 세제 슈요레스.
Now, no matter in which way we're able to practice, whether we have the ability to practice in a very extensive way or whether we find it only possible to train ourselves in very concise and very short practices, it is of greatest importance that we know, that we understand the very essence of such practice, that we familiarize ourselves with what is at the very core of this practice.
담바숨세나 가르치기레세나 저가 셈지기 담바 무시 민매기 담바 중오의 담바 제 되게 숨려야 담바 숨쉬우야레스.
When it comes to any particular kind of practice, there are three main features that one should thoroughly familiarize oneself with. The first is the initial giving rise to the enlightened attitude. The second is to familiarize oneself thoroughly with the main part of the practice, the actual features of each and every individual practice. And the third part is that one should thoroughly familiarize oneself with the necessity and with the meaning of dedication.
저 셈지기 담바세나 다 꿀루 셈지기 말에 디고라 가장 겹지 청거를 무시기 십신 타와까나 두거래 게 슈신기에메 슈 먹어베제 다 된다 저봉에 뭐주시나 어두스레스.
The very first part to giving rise to the enlightened attitude is that which Jamgon Chögyam Rinpoche has been speaking about already a few days ago when he was talking about the importance of giving rise to the correct motivation. So in that regard, this has been thoroughly explained and it's not necessary to go into any further details.
무시 민맥이 담바시나다라 냠네 가리 있는 게 유나래 많이 자골질레 맨나 장기 맨나래 대만이 배 냠은 인생지기 파지기 개원다부 주부 유나래 어따데 무시 민맥이 담바세데 딜밍다기 요레스.
The second part is then to thoroughly familiarize oneself with the main part of the practice, with the very features that the practice, whatever it might be, has, that one makes oneself very thoroughly familiar with these so as to know each and every feature of this particular practice, whatever it might be, to the best of one's ability.
중오의 담바시는 말한도 개와 치중 간제지 세위이나야 안타마대바 ngowacheni ngowadiata ngowaki tsi karitönro matoro khanda tsi singi mebi inaya susu semnane ta khanda rangi kewa kanchebadi an kewa shindodo ngoye de kechimu yimbares.
And then finally follows the most important part of the dedication of whatever merit has been accumulated by way of whichever practice one might have trained oneself in. It does not matter whether one dedicates the merit in a very elaborate or in a rather more concise way. It's also not of great importance that one knows by heart certain refuge prayers to recite at that occasion at the end of one's practice. The important point is that one keeps the necessity and the importance of dedication in mind, and even though one might not know any particular words, one can still dedicate whatever merit one might have accumulated through one's practice in one's own mind, in one's own heart, to make this benefit, make this merit that one has accumulated available for the sake and welfare of all beings. Because whether one dedicates one's merit in an elaborate or in a concise way, it is said that through the dedication of merit, the merit will not be exhausted, but it will forever increase.